Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories. This is episode 33. Let the nightmare begin. The agreement. I still can't get what happened last week out of my head. It doesn't fit together at all. I haven't been able to get any rest for the past few days just thinking about it. So I figured I'd just write it down here and see if you guys had any better luck explaining it. I work in daycare. It's a pretty established place in a big city on the coast. That's about all I can say. I still work there, and I don't want someone linking this post back to my employer. I'm not supposed to talk about anything that happens to the kids online. We mostly cater to the professional crowd, busy people in finance and internet startups who don't use the office daycare, or don't have any office daycare. It's a common sight to see someone in a business suit drop off a baby with a large cup of Starbucks in the other hand. People who can afford to blow $25 a week on coffee. Go figure. One of the attractions was that we offered daycare for infants as well. A godsend for the jet-setting crowd in the city, I suppose. Emma W. was my favorite baby. Emma's her real first name, which is all I'm prepared to share. We all have favorites working in daycare. We're not like parents, having to spread the love out equally. Anyway, when you're faced with 4 screaming babies, you grow to like the quiet ones more than the others. Emma West was as close to a perfect baby as we'd ever cared for. Wasn't much of a crier, unless her nappy was full. Went to sleep like clockwork. She had a crown of wispy blonde hair, which set off her piercing cornflower blue eyes. Mr. William, as far as I could gather, was a self-made businessman. One of those internet startup companies. I never caught what he did, and the 5-minute handovers in the morning really didn't make for startling revelations about his hopes and dreams. He was always dressed sharply. I'm not one for chasing fashion, but some of the other girls here whispered designer labels that I'd only heard of in celebrity mags when they referred to his latest threads. He seemed genuinely pleasant, if a little distracted in the mornings. I'd never seen a Mrs. William. There was a Clara W. On the emergency contact form, all the parents had to leave with the center, but she was listed as his sister. I know some of the others joked about whether he was on the market, so to speak, when they saw his sports car pull up to drop little Emma off in the mornings, but that was just our equivalent of locker room talk. He was awfully rich, though, successful in an ecosystem which chewed up and spit out 100 other young businessmen every year. Some kind of magic touch, the others said, coming out of nowhere and building something up like that. Young Entrepreneur of the Year award and all that jazz. I try and think back to that morning last week. Did Mr. William look strange that morning when he dropped Emma off? To be honest, I've been over those 5 minutes hundreds of times over the past few days. His suit was immaculate. He greeted me like he did with the rest of the staff. Warm smile, a kiss for Emma, a gentle request for us to take good care of his girl. Just about the same thing any of the other 20 or so parents that hour would have said. Maybe there really wasn't anything wrong. I keep on thinking back, because if things had gone differently, I might have been able to save Emma. Shit, I don't know why I wrote that. Emma's fine, where she should be. I don't know why I can't get out of my head that I made a terrible mistake. Why there's this guilt I feel when I check in at work and look at her favorite toys on the playroom floor. The children were taking their afternoon nap after their midday meal. The chime told me that someone was at the desk. The other staff were busy with cleanup, so I went to see who it was. We didn't have any early pickups scheduled, so I thought it might be someone making inquiries. The guy was dressed in a suit, same as most of the other parents. It was a rich part of town. My breath caught a little when I saw him. He was really good looking. Not your high school crush good looking. That guy looked like he was plucked straight from a fashion magazine. He stepped up to the counter and flashed this perfect white smile at me. There was something about this guy. That smile made me go a little weak at the knees, and it's embarrassing to say, but it also gave me a bit of a tingle down in my pants, if you know what I mean. And then the strange part, as soon as I felt that little spark of arousal, it got drowned in this terrible feeling. Dirty. I felt dirty. Shameful. Like that time, I'd walked in to call my younger brother down for dinner and found him jacking it to some random porn site. The kind of dirty that makes you feel like you'll never be able to scrub it off. When a man spoke, he had a sort of radio voice, kind of deep and smooth. It fit him perfectly. Mr. William and I had an agreement. "I'm here to collect Emma," he said. Not that Mr. William sent him. Not introducing himself. It was such a strange thing to say that I just stood there and gaped for a minute. He just stood there, his eyes twinkling with good humor from that devilishly handsome face. Like he already knew the punchline to the joke. It was an odd request, but we do get third-party pickups from time to time. It's very, very rare, and we either need to be told in advance or be informed personally by the parents. Nobody had mentioned that baby Emma was going to be picked up that day. I told the man that we couldn't do it unless he had authorization from the parent. He appeared to wait a while, deep in thought. Then he smiled and told me that everything had been arranged. He gestured toward my phone on the table. Just then, the damn thing rang. I jumped, a little edgier than I should have been. This strange man was really making me nervous. He had this weird air around him. It was intimidating, like I was totally undeserving of his attention. His stare made my breath catch in my throat. On the phone, Mr. William. That was odd. He didn't have my number. Hell, I didn't have his number stored on my personal phone either. And it was on FaceTime as well. I accepted the call, and Mr. Williams' face filled the screen. Something was off about the call. At first, I figured it to be the network connected. A little lag. His lips were out of sync with his voice. It was a disconcerting image, like a badly dubbed film. "Hey, there's a guy over there with you, right?" Mr. William had a look of intense concentration on his face. There was something else there, a mark on his cheek. It was too small, too blur on the screen of my phone to make out. I knew for sure that it had not been there when he left Emma in the morning. It seemed like some angular shape the size of a quarter. "Yes, there is, sir." I was mesmerized by the video feed. "You need to give Emma to him? You hear? Just give him Emma." His tone was clipped, urgent. There was something else about those flapping lips. They seemed to be repeating the same thing over and over. "If you say so, Mr. William. Is there something wrong?" Same 2 words. I could almost make them out. "Nothing's wrong. Just give him a girl. It'll be fine after that." I could see the slight parting of his lips for the sibilant, a small roll of his tongue for the second word, and repeated over and over. I looked back up at the man, standing there with a quiet smirk on his face. "I'll go get the baby." I left him there and slowly made my way to the creches. SL. I turned the words around in my head. What could Mr. William have been trying to say? SL save. Save? Emma? I stood over the crib where she lay sleeping. She gave a gurgle of complaint as I scooped her up into my arms. "Save Emma," Mr. William had said. Did he know about the man at the counter? What agreement did they have? My mind was clouded with questions. I'd been given a direct instruction from the parent. Maybe there was a home emergency or something else. The man beamed widely. He drew closer to the counter. There was a smoky smell about him. I hadn't figured him for a smoker with his perfect white teeth and his toned physique. He reached out for Emma. I stopped short. How do I even know you're the man that Mr. William told me about? You could be anyone, I said defiantly, not intending to let her go without a fight. Oh, Mr. William and I go back a long way. You could call me a godparent almost. His mouth twisted at the penultimate word, like it left a sour taste in his mouth. I've been watching over her since she was a baby. Here, I'll prove it. She has a small birthmark on her left hip. Check and see. Triumph. There was no such birthmark on her. I'd gone over the files of each of my charges, and I knew them almost as well as their parents did. Maybe even better. After all, I spent more time with them. I placed Emma on the table and tugged at her nappy. Expecting to see pale skin, my mouth dropped open when I saw that angry red mark on her hip. That was not all. It was familiar. It was the same mark that had been on Mr. Williams' cheek. I try to remember what the mark looked like, but every time I do, my mind slides off the shape. It's slippery in my mind, like trying to grasp a fish. It was small and angular, almost like one of those runes they have in fantasy novels. That's the worst thing. I stared at it for a good 5 minutes, and I can't form the shape in my head when I try to remember it. You seem reluctant, young lady. I assure you that no further inconvenience will befall you regarding this matter. The business is between me and baby Emma here." He leaned forward onto the counter. "It's a slow day. I suppose you and I could come to some small agreement for the handover. The child needs to be given willingly, and I'd hate for this to be delayed any further than it already has." The smell of smoke grew stronger. I picked up the baby and hugged her to my chest. She began to squall at the uncomfortable pressure. "I'll need to speak to my supervisor about this," I said. The man sighed and straightened up. "I was really hoping to be done with this business this afternoon. No matter, what's due to me will come in the end. If not from you, then maybe from someone else more amenable." I turned around to call for the manager, but when she called back and I turned to the counter, the man was already gone, without so much as a chime from the door. I shook my head. He had been there a moment before, and there hadn't been a single noise when he disappeared. He left nothing but the faint smell of smoke and a freezing cold spot on the counter where he'd rested his elbows. I censored the worst part of the events of the afternoon, saying that someone had come by to pick Emma up and had left without her. The manager, Sandra, didn't believe me. She looked Mr. William up on the register and gave him a call for the counterphone. I watched, biting my lip, as her jaw dropped and her face turned white. "You must have been mistaken. Mr. William," she swallowed. She took a shuddering breath. "That was the cops. Mr. William is dead. After dropping Emma off this morning, he drove straight to his office and blew his brains out." I shivered. Sandra mistook my reaction for shock. That it was but shock of a different kind. I took a look at my call history. 3:35. The call was at 3:35. I shook so hard that the phone clattered to the floor. Sandra was still her take-charge self. Even while reeling from shock, she managed to call up the emergency number from the register with shaky fingers and dialed Clara W., Mr. Williams' sister. The cops weren't going to pick Emma up. They had better things to do. She would be on the red-eye flight over to get Emma the first thing in the morning. That left us with the problem of taking care of the baby overnight. Sandra offered to pay me double to stay there overnight with Emma, and I'd get the day off the next day to boot. It was a practical decision. None of the staff had small children at home, and it would be easier to leave the baby in a familiar environment than to move all the stuff to one of our houses. I had settled down for the evening. Dinner was some forgettable microwave package out of the fridge. At least the place was set up for sleeping over. I'd been given a couple of hours off to grab an overnight bag and a shower. One by one, the rest of the staff said goodbye, until it was just me and Emma. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was someone else in the center apart from Emma and me. The kind of feeling you get on the small hairs on the back of your neck, that something isn't quite right. I put it down to that creepy episode with the dark man earlier in the day and that impossible phone call. I checked on Emma for the 5th or 6th time. She was sound asleep. Sleep came less easy for me. Emma's crying woke me up in the middle of the night. I rushed over to the next room. I checked her nappy. She didn't need changing. It was only after I blinked the sleep from my eyes that I saw the indentation of a hand on the clean white sheets of her crib. A big print. A man's hand, surely. I didn't have to touch it to know that it would be freezing cold, just like the countertop, but I did it anyway. I sucked at my lips as the cold sheet burnt my finger, almost like putting my finger on an ice cube straight from the freezer. I hugged Emma to my chest. I gave a little scream as my phone rang from the next room. I looked at the number. Mr. William. It took me 3 tries to hang up, my quivering finger missing the little spot on the touch screen over and over. Immediately after I killed the call, my phone sounded again, and again, and again until I powered it down. I glared at it, chest heaving. Ever wondered what goes through your mind when there's nothing pumping through your veins but ice, and no motivation but raw animal fear? Nothing. That's what. Instincts take over. You look for an escape, an opportunity. But what was there to run from? The feeling that I was being watched by that dark stranger? The phone calls from a dead man? I hit all the lights in the center, power bill be damned. I felt trapped by those cheery pastel walls. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. Another 3 hours till first light. I held Emma tighter. Those were the longest 3 hours of my life. A rap on the front door woke me up. A tall, thin woman stood outside the glass doors of the center. She was dressed for mourning, black from head to toe. It was windy out, her short bob whipping around her head. I hurried to let her in. She introduced herself as Mr. William's sister. Sensing my doubt, she showed me her driver's license and the phone, which had the number on our records. Emma didn't complain when the lady picked her up. I got the release form ready and passed it over for the lady's perfunctory signature. Everything checked out except for one thing. She didn't have a trace of sadness around her, apart from a little dark under her eyes from the late flight across the country. Funny, for someone whose brother had just shot himself. She flashed me a smile as she pushed the signed form back across the glass counter. I watched her stride confidently back out through the glass doors. There was something out of place with Mr. Williams' sister. From someone else more amenable. That's what the man said. If not me, then someone else. There was a thud as the door closed. The wind snagged the woman's hair from the collar of her dress. And there, red and raw on the nape of her neck, was that same symbol. By the time I got out from behind the counter and out through the door, they were both gone. It's been a week. Mr. William didn't have family in town. The authorities didn't bother us about her, really. A cop called by to make sure that she had been handed over to an appropriate guardian, and that was that. When nobody was looking, I would try dialing both Mr. Williams' number as well as his sister's. The numbers were live for a day or so, then they were disconnected. I've tried for hours to remember the symbol that was on Emma's hip, the bizarre thing that appeared the day her father died. But I can't. I just can't do it. I wonder what kind of agreement he had with Mr. William and how Emma fit into the whole thing. I hope that Emma is all right, somewhere out there, and that I'm just being paranoid. I know deep in my heart that this is a lie I need to tell myself if I am to have any semblance of normalcy after that one day. Most of all, I try to forget the face of the dark stranger with the perfect smile, who made me feel all hot and shameful at once, with those freezing cold hands. And I lie awake in bed, hoping that if I forget him, then maybe, just maybe, he will not remember me. Shadow Hill. It was an overcast and dull Saturday afternoon when I was attacked. I was 12 years old at the time, and despite the threat of rain, we took to the streets as my friends usually did on the weekends. The neighborhood always seemed safe, and looking back, it was a wonderful place to grow up, living in a vibrant shadow of the city center, only a 15-minute train journey away, while the parks and quiet streets of our suburb, on the outskirts of that urban madness, provided plenty of places to explore. That day, it was my two friends, Jake and Miles, who had knocked on my door, asking if I wanted to join them and head out for a while on our bikes. Both lived on the same street as me, and for that reason, we had been as thick as thieves since we were toddlers. We took to the pavements at first in plain sight of our parents before turning a corner and showing off to one another on the roads, pulling wheelies and unimpressive bunny hops as most kids that age often do. I say most kids, but I was pretty timid at the time, and while I loved hanging out with my friends, I never had the same sense of abandonment or recklessness which they thrived on. They would quite happily bomb down the highest, steepest hills without a care in the world while I would stutter behind, scuffing my feet on the ground to slow my own descent. After buying some sweets, chocolate, and a pack of trading cards complete with cheap and brittle bubble gum from Jackie's shop, we intended to head to Shadow Hill, one of our favorite places to ride around on our bikes. But just as we exited the shop, Miles noticed someone from his class. His name was Liam, and he had moved to our school the year previous. We didn't know him all that well, but we had hung out with him once or twice before. Miles walked over and struck up a conversation with him for a few minutes before coming back over and picking up his bike. We turned to leave, but there was something that bothered me about that boy, Liam. He seemed lost somehow. Miles said that he was waiting on his mom coming out of shop, but I could see that look in his eyes, something which I'm sure I had worn many times before myself. It simply said, "I want to hang around with you guys." We all got on our bikes, and just as we left, I shouted over to him, "Liam, do you know Shadow Hill?" "Yeah, I do," he replied. "We'll be up there for the next few hours. Why don't you get your bike and come meet us after you've helped your mom?" Liam seemed pleased to be asked, and while he wasn't certain how long he would be, he did say that he'd try and meet up with us at some point. We said goodbye, carrying our provisions from the shop in stuff pockets, and cycled off towards our destination. Shadow Hill was where we were heading, and I couldn't wait to get there. It was perfect. The street was long and straight. The road surface was uncommonly smooth, and it ended in a small cul-de-sac, which resulted in little traffic, if any, to speak of. We could ride up and down all day without being disturbed, except on the few occasions that one of the grown-ups who lived there would get tired of us hanging around or sneaking into their gardens, playing tag, or one-man hunt. But for the most part, that long secluded street was a fantastic place to get away from rules and complaining adults, even if it was only 10 minutes away from our homes. We weren't a gang or anything close to it, but that place was ours, and while many of the other kids in the neighborhood hung around at parks or at the shops, we quite happily clung on to that perfect stretch of quiet tarmac that no one could take away from us. Tearing up and down the road, cycling as fast as we could, Jake enjoyed showing off, pedaling quickly while putting both hands behind his head as if relaxing on a sun lounger. Miles was no slouch himself and would dart about off curbs and back on again, occasionally mimicking a character from an Australian soap opera that we often laughed at. The clouds knitted together tightly above, brooding menacingly, but the afternoon was not over yet as we continued to play and enjoy our patch. After receiving an earful from one woman who just hated us sitting on her garden wall, especially when my other friend Miles pushed Jake over into her garden as a joke during her red-faced, ranting rage, we finally traipsed along the street with our bikes by our side, cursing the woman under our breaths. A loud crash bellowed from the clouds above, and the hazed smell of ozone climbed up through the air. When I was a kid, thunderstorms always held a real fascination for me, and to this day they still do, but no matter how much I understand why it happens, when the sky opens up and a torrid torrential downpour threatens to drown all around, it still seems surreal to me, almost unearthly. The rain streamed down in thick sheets, and within a minute, a thin layer of water began to flow along the street into the drains on either side. The complaining woman ran indoors quickly, her anger at us soon replaced by a desire to avoid being drenched. The noise of millions of raindrops smashing on the parked cars and concrete below became deafening as we were instantly soaked to the bone. It was clear that the day was over, and while Jake seemed keen to stay and pull a variety of skidding stunts in the water, Miles just laughed, challenging us both to a race home. Off he sped at a rate I could never hope to equal, the water spraying out from under his wheels. Jake followed instantly, damn sure that he wouldn't be beaten. The crescendo of thumping water was now deafening, and as both my friends pulled away into the distance, I clumsily climbed aboard my bike and pedaled as fast as I could. With each panting breath, the rain fell harder until it streamed at such a rate down my face that I could barely see ahead. I shivered in the increasing cold, and as I continued on, I could no longer tell if my friend were near or far. I cannot explain the feeling I had at that moment. Perhaps it is hindsight which has bound it to my memory, but there in that horrid downpour, I felt isolated. Anyone with any sense would have run for cover and locked themselves away, happily inside their houses. And at the speed my friends had darted away, I was sure they had left the street, or at least reached its end. An intense feeling of fear drove me on, because for me Shadow Hill may have appeared remote, isolated in the blinding rain, but it did not feel empty. In my panic, my wild pedaling shook the bike from side to side, and just as I lifted one hand from the handlebars to wipe the rain from my eyes, something walked out from between two parked cars right in front of me. I swerved, squeezed the brakes, and as the bike screeched to a halt, I was thrown forward, tumbling on the ground, smashing my face and jaw on the road surface in the process. The rain poured into my mouth, carrying with it the metallic taste of my own blood. I let out a cry as I reached up with my tongue to feel nothing but exposed gum and broken shards of teeth that were surely sprayed across the ground. My injuries left me confused and disorientated. But as I screamed for my friends, it became clear that no one would hear me over the immense roar of the rain. Then, the sky darkened, and that strange, alarming sensation that I was not alone proved correct. Someone was standing over me. A combination of tears, blood, and rain stung my eyes, and though I couldn't make out his face, I could tell it was a man. He was broad and stocky, wearing denims and a dark brown coat. And while he wasn't exceptionally tall, his rain-battered frame gave the impression of immense strength. Despite the pain, despite the shock of losing teeth and cracking my head open, every fiber of my being told me to run, to get away. But I couldn't. With the first movement of my leg, the man pressed his foot down on top of my knee with such force that bursts of excruciating pain shot up through my body. My screams of both agony and terror drowned out by the still falling, torrential rain. Why was he doing this to me? A grown man? He leaned over and grabbed my bleeding head by the hair, yanking it forcefully upwards. No one can know the feeling of an adult exerting their full strength upon a child, unless you have been through it yourself. The fear, the utter helplessness, the feeling of resentment and betrayal at a person who should protect, but instead harms. No matter how much I struggled, no matter how much I flailed, my puny 12-year-old body could provide no amount of strength to free me from his foul, overpowering grip. But a bike thrown as hard as possible by two dear friends square at his face was more than enough to make him stumble backwards, causing him to slip in the rain and batter his back and body against the solid street surface. As the man staggered to his feet once more, Jake and Miles grabbed me by the arms and forced me to run faster than I ever had. We dare not look back for fear of our pursuer being close. We panted and heaved, and as the adrenaline surged through my veins, I forgot my injuries for a moment and fled as quickly as any child ever had. As we reached the end of Shadow Hill, Jake and Miles ran round the corner without looking back. But not me, for curiosity has always been my sin, and perhaps my punishment. The rain calmed at that moment, easing off to nothing but the most subtle of droplets, and as I squinted through blood and tears, I saw at the end of the road the brutal figure of the man who had attacked me, disappearing forever out of sight, with the bloodied, motionless body of poor Liam over his shoulder. I didn't speak for a long time after that day. I was taken to hospital and had surgery on my mouth and jaw. It took months for me to recover, but no amount of medicine or stitching could repair what had been done to me. The police investigated, of course, and both Jake and Miles were hailed as heroes by their families, and even mine. I will always be indebted to them. Without their actions, I am certain I would have ended up like poor Liam. The worst part was that the police didn't believe me. They said that the blow to my head must have caused me to imagine things. A child abductor in the middle of a suburb in plain daylight? Impossible. There was no evidence, and even my friends, who had indeed seen a man grabbing me, had not been able to see clearly what he looked like in the rain. My memory was written off as a coping mechanism or fabrication caused by head trauma. But I knew what I saw. It was not my mind that had been confused. It was the world. Liam was never seen again. His mother said she had only left him outside for a few minutes while she picked up milk. She broke down crying at one of the press conferences, and I cried with her from my hospital bed, for she knew what had happened to him, even if she could never prove it, even if no one would believe her. She blamed herself. I hope one day she finds peace, but if she does, she'll be stronger than me. That peace has never come. After I recovered, we moved away. It was just too hard to stay there. The whispers in the street, the pitying glances, and the fear. That was the worst part, knowing that somewhere out there, the man who took Liam still roamed, and that he had gotten away with it. The years passed. I grew up, tried to forget, made new friends, started a new life. But sometimes when I walk alone on a rainy day, I hear the crash of thunder and feel a chill run down my spine. I look around and expect to see him, that monster in the dark coat, waiting, watching, looking for his next victim. And I remember Shadow Hill, the street we thought was ours, the place where we believed we were safe. A perfect stretch of tarmac that became the backdrop for something I will never forget. I don't ride bikes anymore. I don't like the rain, and I'll never go back there, not even in memory. But some nights I wake up sweating, dreaming of Liam's face, and I wonder, did he know what was happening? Was he already gone when that man carried him away? Or was he alive, broken like me, scared and helpless? Sometimes I imagine him calling out for us, for me, and I hate myself, because I look back. I saw, and I didn't do anything. I ran. I survived, but he didn't, and I don't know if I can forgive myself for that. They say you're supposed to grow up and move on, but how can I? How can anyone? The dark secret of Everchild. Elias Everchild is not what most people think he is. Or I guess I should say, would be. But honestly, he's real. I have not only seen him, but I have also felt him. I met Elias Everchild when I was about 11 years old. It had been a hard day with my family. I was playing outside with my siblings. They were both older than me. Mira was my 15-year-old sister. Aaron was my 14-year-old brother. Of course, like most siblings their age, they didn't want to be around me. They had dates and homework. Aaron had drugs and other stupid stuff like that too, but they were forced to entertain me. I don't specifically remember what we were doing, but I do remember noticing an animal on the road. My siblings noticed me looking at it, and Aaron told me to go see what it was. My brother always made me nervous, so I walked up to it and realized it was a dead cat. From my view, I could see that the cat was missing at least one eye. Where the eye should have been, a nest of maggots was beginning to form. I could see bald spots and scratches that seeped blood. It was also missing a leg and half of its tail. Aaron told me to touch it. My sister argued that it was disgusting and could be infected. Aaron smacked her hard. Naturally, she cried out in pain, and he shouted at her, "Stay the fuck out of it." Then he got right in my face and told me quietly that he wanted me to pick it up. I was hesitant, but after watching what he did to Mira, I had no choice. I reached around it and found that it still had an eye in the other socket, but it was also missing half of its chest. Inside was all kinds of gross, traumatic stuff from days of lying on the street. Next was even worse, and I wish I would have risked my brother hurting me, because he told me to put it on our neighbor's lawn. She was an old widow, although I don't remember her name. She is long dead by now. Aaron told me to put the cat on the porch, ring the doorbell, and run away as fast as I could. So I did. I set the cat down on the porch, wiped my bloody hands on my jeans. I looked at the doorbell. I probably wouldn't have done it if my brother hadn't shouted, "Hurry up, you little fucker." Terrified of him, I rang the doorbell and dashed behind another neighbor's bush. The widow opened the door and shrieked at the disgusting sight of the cat. I looked for my siblings, who had both apparently run off. Obviously, my hiding spot was not very hidden, and I was easily spotted. She started shouting at me, and I ran home. That night, I was scolded by both my parents. My other siblings were let off with a warning. Aaron blamed me, saying I doorbell ditched with the dead cat, even after he told me to stay away from it. And because of the red mark on Myra's cheek, he even said that I slapped my sister when she tried to intervene. My sister, out of fear of my brother, agreed. All of my attempts to defend myself were deflected. I was sent to bed early. I sat there waiting to get called down for dinner. I heard the table being set, waited to be called to eat, but never was. I sat in anger and solitude until midnight. That's when he showed up. Of course, my room was very dark, but because my family was so poor, I had holes in my curtains and light always peeked through. I could see shadows coming through, dissipating what little light was left. That's when I saw a hand slowly open the curtain, and a boy about my age jumped through. It was Elias Everchild. Elias was not exactly what I expected. I could barely make out what he looked like in the dark. The moonlight behind him wasn't much help. Even though I couldn't see him clearly, I could tell he was looking at me. I could feel it. He asked, "It's been a hard day, hasn't it? Who are you?" I replied. I did not feel afraid. Rather, I felt comforted by this stranger's voice. "My name is Elias Everchild," he answered. And what if I told you that you could go someplace where you would never have to worry about any of that sort of thing again? I couldn't help it. I wanted to say yes, even though I knew I shouldn't. I said, "You want me to go to Everland?" Elias finished. Despite what had happened that day, I was still reluctant to leave. Despite the fact that my sister didn't do much to help me, I knew that deep down she wanted to. She was just as helpless as I was in the situation. As if reading my thoughts, Elias added, "Don't worry about your sister. We'll bring her in soon. But first, we have to prepare." After that, there was nothing to consider. Elias, Everchild, stretched out his hand so that I could take it and said, "The reason birds can fly and we can't is simply because they have perfect faith. For to have faith is to have wings." And just like that, I flew. Flying was amazing. Like a dream you never want to wake up from. We went higher and higher until we were just below the clouds. We could see the lights coming from the buildings. It was beautiful. The best part was that I wasn't afraid of falling, not even for a moment, considering I was hundreds of feet in the air, far too high for anyone to see, especially in the dark. You might imagine that I would have been terrified, but I wasn't. I was overjoyed, bursting with a fearless excitement. It was pure joy. After flying around the buildings, we took our leave and headed over the ocean. It took several minutes to traverse. The further we got from land, the darker the water became. I assumed it was just the lack of lights until I saw Everland. It appeared as an abyss in the sea, darker than the sky. There were no stars at all, no clouds. Everything was pitch black. This was the first time I became nervous since I had met Elias Everchild. When we landed, the island seemed a little lighter, but not by much. Then I realized something. I hadn't seen Luma at all, so I asked, "Hey, Elias Everchild, where is Luma?" Elias looked at me. Although it was too dark to see his face, I could tell he was smiling, and it was very sinister. Now I was no longer nervous. I was afraid. After staring for several seconds, he turned around and walked into what appeared to be a cave. There was no light in the cave. The passage was lengthy. Every time we stopped, I could feel breathing on my neck. But after a couple of hours, I saw light. We walked into a new room, and the light from the fire in the middle was blinding and hot. "Sit down," Elias commanded, "and give yourself some time for your eyes to adjust to the light." In no mood to argue, I did as I was told. Even before my eyes had a chance to adjust, Elias turned to me and asked, "Do you believe in fairies? If you believe, clap your hands." I again did as I was told. Instantaneously, my vision returned to me. In the newfound light, and to my utter shock and dismay, I beheld the handiwork of a monster. A horror beyond my wildest imagination. A pile of corpses, many of which belonged to people who appeared to be just a few years older than me, lay before me. All of them horribly mutilated. I turned around to see that more than teenagers had been harmed. I saw cages filled with fairies. Some were dead, but most were alive and in pain. Some are missing limbs, legs or arms. In some cases, even their wings have been torn off. Others have been impaled with sewing needles repeatedly. Once again, I turned around to see Elias Everchild, and it was like I was truly seeing him for the first time, seeing him as he truly looked. Elias was the worst sight of all. His skin was paper pale. His eyes were completely black, except for the pupils, which were red. He was bleeding from both his eyes and his gaping mouth, and he was smiling, sincerely smiling. His hair was caked with a mixture of both fresh and dry blood. His clothes were a dark green type of cloth, stitched together by human hair. Instead of sleeves, he had leaves over his shoulders. His pants, which were hemmed just below the knees, were in tatters. To top it all off, he wore cloth shoes. In terror, I ran, but soon realized there was no way out. Not even the entrance through which I'd arrived was accessible. And all the while, Elias just stood there smiling, and he said to me, "I know I've made a mess, but you see, they grow up so fast. This way they'll stay young forever, just like me, and they will always be in Everland." I sat with my head tucked between my legs. Elias, Everchild, grabbed me by my hair, lifted me up, and said, "I have a gift for you. I know you were worried about leaving your sister behind, so I brought her here with us." Then, with his fist still wound around a fistful of my hair, he forced me to look at a sad figure chained up on one side of the room. It was my sister, Mira. She looked awful. Elias continued, "You see, she's just a little too old to be benevolent. But you needn't be sorry for her. She was the type who enjoys growing up, and in the end, she aged of her own free will." Then Elias chained me across from her so that I could watch as he worked on her. Before long, we were both in agony, sobbing uncontrollably. Elias grabbed Mira by the hair and tore out a handful. She screamed in anguish. He tossed the hair to the ground in front of me, put his hands on either side of Myra's head, and shushed her. Then he dug his thumbs in her eyes as she shrieked. In moments, she was blind. Blood poured out of her sockets. "I can't have you sitting down," Elias chided her. "You need to feel the excitement with me." He drew a knife and stabbed her in the shoulder, then twisted the blade. He then pulled a hook from the dark ceiling, sticking it through the fresh wound. Then he slowly cut her stomach with a knife, deep enough to ensure that she would bleed out. He worked his way up, so he could watch himself cut her without blood getting in the way. He worked all the way up to her chest, at which point he stopped and said, "Mira, you don't have to cry. I bet I have the solution to your tears." Then he cut out her tongue and tossed it into my lap. I was choking back sobs by then. Next, he dug a knife between each of Myra's fingernails. The first one came off clean. The second one was just as swift. When it came to the third one, he slowly inserted the blade and twisted it. Finally, he took the knife and stabbed Mira in the stomach, giving the blade one final twist. Mira moaned one last time before succumbing to her injuries. Then Elias turned around and said, "Don't worry, you'll never grow up." But he didn't kill me. I'm still here. And I watch Elias Everchild do the same thing that he did to my sister, to other kids, every night. I used to try and warn them, but he taught me that it was wrong to question him. Elias Everchild taught me a lot of things. I still have at least a few years until he kills me. If I'm lucky, I'll persuade him into doing it sooner. I love you, Mira, and I'm sorry. The disappearance of Elise Monroe. I've been depressed for a long time, mostly since my dad died. All his friends called him a hero. He was a cop, and he sacrificed himself to save the lives of 23 people being held by an active shooter. I was 9 when that happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. But yesterday was my 17th birthday, and now my life is a nightmare. My mom eventually remarried, but I can't blame her for that. She was lonely and needed help raising a troubled kid. I just wish she'd been more aware of whom she was bringing into our lives. He's not why I'm in trouble, but he's an asshole who treats my mom like shit. She's too in love with him to see it. No, he's not the reason I ended up here, but he's a precipitating factor. It started when I heard that my friend Elise had run away. I didn't get it. Elise lived in a suburban wonderland. Her parents were still married, they doted on her siblings weren't douchebags, and she got really good grades. I mean, not straight A's, but good enough that she was on the honor roll, and her folks were proud of her. Idyllic is the word I'd use. I spoke to her parents a time or two. They wanted to know the first time if Elise had said anything to me. She hadn't, and I'd said as much. The second time, I went over to be, supportive in their tough time. I knocked on their door, and Mrs. Monroe answered. "Oh, Amber. Hi. Is everything okay?" I said it was, "Hey, Mrs. Monroe. I just thought I'd come over to say hi and see if you guys had heard anything regarding Elise. I'm sorry if it seems insensitive." Elise's mom opened the door wide and smiled a little. "Oh no. Honey, please come in. I know you probably miss her as much as we do." I did. Elise had been one of my best friends maybe 5 years ago. We'd grown apart a little after my dad died. I guess that's my fault. I withdrew from everyone. I said as much to Mrs. Monroe, and her eyes welled up with tears. "Amber, we don't know where Elise is, but we got a letter shortly after she went missing." It shocked me a little. Missing? I thought she was just a runaway. I don't understand. Mrs. Monroe opened a binder that sat on her coffee table and pushed it toward me where I sat next to her on the couch. I read it aloud. Mom, Dad, I'm with Darian. I'm not in danger. I just needed to get out of this dead-end town and see the rest of the world. I'm sorry if this disappoints you, but I need this. Love, Elise. Elise's mom closed the binder, sniffed back tears, and said, We got this maybe a week after she disappeared. It's what convinced the police that she was a runaway. I looked at her face, and I could tell that she was less than convinced of her own words. I couldn't help myself. Who the fuck is Darian? Mrs. Monroe flinched at my language, and I apologized. Sorry, I just don't understand any of this. I never knew any Darian. I mean, I know Elise and I aren't the best of friends anymore, but I never heard of her seeing anyone. A small smile touched her lips. It's all right, dear Richard. Mr. Monroe said the same thing when he read the letter. I'd never heard Mr. Monroe swear in the 10 years that Elise and I had been best friends. Was Elise depressed at all? Mrs. Monroe frowned a bit and started to shake her head, then stopped. I won't lie to you, Amber. I feel like I don't know who my own daughter was. If she was depressed, I didn't know it. I spoke with her a little while longer and thanked her for her time and the memories. I should have gone home, but I didn't want to deal with Frank by myself. I called my mom at work and told her I was going to go to the library and do my homework before I went home. She said she'd see me when she got off work. I hate lying to my mom, but I wasn't about to tell her that I was going to find a nice quiet spot in the woods and smoke some weed. I did just that. After the emotional drain of the Monroe house, I just needed to not give shit for a little while. I found my spot in the woods and pulled my stash out from under the stump. I hid it there ever since Frank busted me smoking in my old playhouse in the backyard, Dick. I wasn't too far from home, and I wasn't exactly lying, because if my mom or Frank ever pinged my location on my cell, it had put me within 100 meters of the library. I took a few hits and leaned back against the stump, closed my eyes, and just listened to the trees. It was dead quiet, but it shouldn't have been. No birds, no critters, or even insect noises. Nothing. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up from the wrongness of it. I was about to open my eyes when I heard a snapping noise, like someone or something had stepped on a branch. I should have gotten the hell out of there, but it was like my brain reverted to childhood. You know, if I can't see it, it can't see me. I heard more muffled noises until they stopped just behind me and to the left. The shifting of fabric as if someone were sitting or squatting near me. A deep, almost melodic voice came to me. I'd say I heard it, but that's not quite right. I mean, I did hear it, but it was inside my head. Keeping your eyes closed is probably a good idea, kid. I felt a hand take the pipe from me. I heard a lighter spark and the sound of someone inhaling as the voice spoke again. Not bad. Before you dismiss this, no, I'm not a hallucination. I opened my mouth to speak and the voice shushed me. My mouth clamped shut, but not of my own accord. This is just a warning to you, Amber. Please stop asking questions about Elise. Let the Monroes be. They're in enough pain as it is, don't you think? I nodded, trying to think for myself. I felt a sharp poke somewhere behind my eye, and the voice said, Yes, I am who the letter referred to as Darian. Elise is with me, and it's going to stay that way for as long as I like. I felt tears squeeze themselves out from under my eyelids. I felt the pipe placed back in my hand, and the barest of a breeze blown from the direction of my tormentor. No, not a breeze. It was his breath. It was fetid, rotten, with just a touch of musk from the weed. I would hate to have to talk with you again, Amber. You're not exactly my type, but I'll make an exception if I need to. Unbidden, images flashed through my mind. Tall, pretty, willowy girls like Elise. Their faces bordered in the black and white of missing posters. So many of them. I shuddered and shook my head emphatically. He spoke again. Good. I see we understand each other perfectly. I hope there's not a next time. Amber. I stayed there, shaking, eyes squeezed shut for how long, I don't know. I started to hear the sounds of nature again. Bird song, the buzzing of insects. I screamed when my phone rang. My eyes flew open, and at first I was surprised to see it was dark. I saw my mom's number on the screen and answered. Amber Marie Townsend, I've been texting you for an hour. I'm in the library parking lot. Get your ass out here and let's go home. Dinner's getting cold. I took in a shuddering breath and told her I would be out in a minute. I stashed my pipe and made my way to her car. She chewed my ass the whole way home about not answering her, and all I could do was apologize. I'm writing this down, so I remember it. I hope he can't dig into my head and see that I am. If he does, I may be the next runaway. The disappearing game. 58, 59, 60. Hide and go seek was the order of the evening. 2 days of rain with no signs of stopping meant mud, mud, and more mud. Clara already knew where the kids were. They always hid together and in the same spot. Twins like to stick together, it seemed. Where could they be? She said convincingly, as they giggled somewhere in the house. She tiptoed down the hall and peeked into their room. Goodness, I will never find them. Maybe here, she shouted as she dropped to the floor and pulled the covers back. Air. Guess not, she murmured, searching the empty space under the bed. How about here? She shouted again, this time at an empty closet. They're really making me work for it this time, she thought. Nothing in the bath, no one in the laundry. She knew they were too scared to venture in the basement, but decided to check after she'd exhausted all other options. Clara noisily stamped down the stairs to announce her presence, hoping to elicit some giggles and shuffling. I'm going to find you, she sang. She stopped, noting the uncanny silence. With a 5-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, the only silence she ever experienced happened while they were sleeping, and even that was often interrupted by nightmares. Ethan, Lila, come on kids, you win. I give up, she shouted merrily. Ollie ollie oxen free. You win, she shouted with slightly more urgency. Mommy's not playing anymore. Come on now, it's time for dinner. Still nothing. All right, how about this? If you come out now, we'll get a big cheesy pizza, 2 buckets of whatever flavor ice cream you want, and we'll rent a movie. But you have to come out now. A minute passed, and the panic set in. All right, kids, come out now. If you don't come out, you're going to be in trouble. Okay? She shouted in her serious voice. Ethan Oliver Jones, you and your sister come out this instant. Clara suddenly heard movement above her and sprinted up the stairs. What on earth took you so long? She fussed as she reached the ground level. I was starting to get war. Clara froze. The front door was wide open. She knew she'd locked it. She was obsessive about locking the door and checked it at least twice a day. She ran out onto the porch, dizzy and nearly hyperventilating. Ethan, Lila. She ran inside and called the police. Clara wasn't thinking clearly. Yes, I need help. My children are missing. Cherry Street, 43, Cherry Street. I was playing hide and go seek with them and I couldn't find them and I searched everywhere. And then I found the door open and they're not here. They're gone, she shrieked, the panic building. Is there anyone who might want to take them? Could they be with their father? A relative? The neighbors? Asked a calm voice on the other end of the phone. My family doesn't live near here, and the neighbors are out in... Clara's stomach knotted up. Oh God, their father. I have a restraining order against him. You shouldn't even. He's not supposed to be in town or anywhere near or... Ma'am, I want you to go inside and lock the doors, just to be safe. Make sure all windows are latched as well. I'm sending a dispatch unit to patrol the area. Can you do that for me? The operator asked in a soothing voice. Yes, okay. I'm inside, Clara panted. Good. Thank you. Can you tell me about their father? The officer asked. Clara shuddered as the memories flooded back. He murdered his ex-wife in our home. It was all over the news. Nathan Cross. Oh, yes. Yes, I remember. The officer interrupted. Shouldn't he be? Clara waited for her to finish and heard silence. Hello? Hello? Are you there? Clara tried another number, and there was no dial tone. She jumped hard at the sound of a loud knock at the door. She saw what looked like an officer's uniform through the frosted glass and rushed to unlock it. Are you okay, Clara? It was Officer Mark Doyle, an old peer of Clara's from high school and police officer in town for over a decade. Gosh, you got here fast, Clara sighed, relieved to not be alone anymore. The kids, Mark, they're gone. Don't worry, Clara, Mark interjected, holding her shoulders as she started to weep again. They're probably just running around the neighborhood, messing around. I've got 2 cars out patrolling right now. Just stay inside and try to keep a cool head. We'll find him. Clara locked the door behind her again and paced the floor, wringing her hands, peering out the window, and rechecking every potential hiding spot. As she crawled out from under the dining room table, she suddenly noticed motion on the 2nd floor of the house next door. Her breathing stopped. They were supposed to be away for the weekend. A light in the attic flicked on, and the curtains swayed. Clara walked right up to her window, close enough for her nose to touch the glass. When the light suddenly flicked off again, Clara yanked the curtains closed, feeling exposed. She ran through the house, checking the locks again, roughly pulling all the curtains closed. She reached the glass door in the kitchen and came face to face with her neighbor Caleb, screaming loudly enough to make him jump. Caleb frowned, breathing heavily, and shook his head. Jesus, Clara, what is it? What happened? Clara cracked the door open, the chain lock still in place. Sorry, Caleb, She suddenly remembered he was supposed to be out of town. Wait, why are you here? And why are you in town? Caleb looked slightly offended. Well, Sophie and I got into a big argument over how her dad always treats me, and while it was pretty rough, I am being spared a trip to see the in-laws. But, yeah, I got home like 10 minutes ago and saw Officer Doyle leaving, so I figured I'd come checking on you and see if everything was okay. Oh, yeah, it's just, well, the kids, we were playing hide-and-go-seek, and I couldn't find them, and then something shiny glinting by Caleb's side caught her eye. He gripped a pair of shears in his left hand. Caleb followed her eyes down to see what had stopped her so abruptly. WHO. Sorry, I was crossing the backyard to get to yours. A lot of brush was getting in my way. So I thought I'd just get on it and, get out of the way and, you don't have to talk to me through the door, Caleb smiled, taking a step forward. Clara didn't flinch. Her mind was racing. The phone line was down. Caleb had appeared out of nowhere. The shears, the phone, the kids, the shears. Clara slammed the door in Caleb's face and locked the other 2 bolts. Hey, Caleb shouted and banged the door with a fist holding the shears. I just want to talk, he shouted, still banging the door. Clara ran upstairs and tore through her father's old chest, desperately clawing around for the old 9mm. Why would Caleb want her children? Was he trying to get her alone? His wife was out of town, and he was always flirting just a bit too much. She found the gun just as she heard glass shattering downstairs. She silently loaded and cocked it. As much as instinct told her to hide, she couldn't, not with Ethan and Lila's lives at stake. She crouched down, surveying the first floor for the top step. The kitchen door was completely obliterated, and Caleb lay sprawled out on his chest. It had to be Nathan. He took the kids, and now he was back to take her. This can't be happening, she repeated in her head over and over. She cracked. She couldn't take the tension any longer. What do you want from us? She screeched down the stairs. Clara, she heard Mark shout back. Oh God, she cried out as she raced down the stairs. Mark stood in the living room facing the kitchen with his pistol drawn. She threw her left arm around him, keeping the gun out of sight. She wasn't entirely sure if it was legal for her to have the weapon. Caleb was here, he's not supposed to be, and he had these big shears and I freaked out. She wailed into his shoulder. I think Nathan was here, there's blood everywhere. Don't worry, I showed up just as Caleb broke the glass to get in through your kitchen door. I shot him. It wasn't Nathan, he said, stroking her hair. But I didn't hear any gunshots, Clara said, confused, thinking surely Caleb had been stabbed. Silencer, said Mark. I didn't want to shake up the whole neighborhood if I didn't have to. All right, Clara exhaled. Are my children at his house? Did you find them? Was Caleb even involved in that? Or does he just have amazing timing? Is he going to be okay? Mark said, holding her tighter. You don't have to worry about Caleb or Nathan or any other man ever again. I'll make sure of it. Now, how about some dinner? Clara pulled away, frowning. Mark, I can't exactly eat right now. My children are missing. She began tearing up. Mark continued smiling. How about I go with you and we look for them together? You know, help the other guys you said are looking. Clara offered. Let them do their job, sweetie. They don't need any help. These are professional police officers. We're going to find little Ethan and Lila. Clara stopped moving, trying to remember when she'd told him the names of her children. They went to the same high school together, but that was all. He didn't know anything about her children. In fact, he hadn't even asked for their descriptions to tell the dispatchers who to look for. We'll get a big cheesy pizza, he continued, 2 flavors of ice cream, and, hey, maybe we'll even rent a movie to get your mind off of things. Her heart dropped. Her stomach flew into her throat, and her breathing grew short and shallow. Mark, how do the dispatchers know who to look for? Clara asked slowly. I told them what they look like, Clara. You really need to calm down. Mark said with a new note of seriousness to his voice. Mark, how? How do you know what my children look like? Clara asked, gripping the gun still hidden behind her back. Mark's smile faded, and he took a step closer, his fists clenched. That's really not important, Clara. Don't you want your children to be found? Don't you want them safe? Don't you want your children back, Clara? Why do you keep calling me Clara? You ask a lot of questions, Mark shouted, making Clara jump. That is what you liked to be called in high school, wasn't it? When we still hung out. Before you met that freak, Nathan, and cut me out of your life completely. Mark, where are my kids? Clara shouted back. Nathan's children are none of your concern anymore. Mark roared. Clara pulled the gun from behind her back and pointed it at Mark, shaking, praying she loaded it correctly. Caleb didn't break the glass door, did he? Clara asked softly. Did he? She shouted. He was just another man that wanted to get to you. Mark slurred lazily, unfazed by the gun, as he plopped down on the couch. You know, if you shoot me, you'll never find them. Clara felt her while slipping as she sobbed. What do you want? She whimpered. Sit, Mark ordered, and give me the gun. Clara did as she was told and collapsed into the armchair. Did you even notice how much I cared about you in high school? I never stopped caring. I've been watching you and keeping you safe for years, Clara. Mark spat. Mark continued his diatribe, relaying stories from high school that Clara barely remembered. As he ranted, she noticed a light out of the corner of her eye. It was Sophie. She was home from her parents' place. Please come here looking for Caleb, Clara thought to herself. Please, please, please. Clara kept her eyes focused on Mark as she noticed Sophie crossing her backyard in her peripheral. I can keep you safe. No one will ever touch you ever again. Think of Lila. Think of little Ethan. I'll keep the mess. Mark and Clara jumped as Sophie's screams interrupted them. She found Caleb. Clara seized the moment to snatch back the gun. Mark lunged for it, setting it off. His face froze, his eyelids drooping. He'd taken a bullet straight to the gut. Mark staggered backward, crashing to the floor. Clara ran to Sophie, who held Caleb in her arms. He drifted in and out of consciousness. There's no time to explain. Please, I need to use your phone. Clara begged. She helped Sophie drag Caleb to the front yard, just as 2 officers screeched to a halt in their patrol cars. 4 officers with guns drawn rushed toward the house, yelling for Clara and Sophie to lay down. Apparently, neighbors contacted police at the sound of the gunshot. The officers didn't immediately comprehend why one of their own was lying on Clara's floor after her children went missing. However, after hearing knocking coming from Mark's patrol vehicle, they found Ethan and Lila unharmed in the trunk. Mark survived, but was fired and sent to a psychiatric ward for counseling. The gathering. We got to the hotel late. The kiddo was a mess, and so was I. I let Lena sleep through the flight, while I tried to keep our 2-year-old girl from having a total meltdown. As the plane started its final descent, my relief was punctured by an absolute nightmare of a stabbing sinus headache. Something to do with the change in pressure, I guess. And that's when Emma started screaming. By the time we got to the hotel, I needed a drink, and Lena, bless her, knew that. We passed by the hotel lounge, and she suggested that I duck in for a nightcap while she put Emma to sleep. I did not argue. I sat down at the bar and ordered a double rum and Coke. At first, it was just me the bartender, and some guy in a business suit. It was coming on midnight, but business suit was talking loudly on his phone. "You tell Jensen that DDP needs to happen tonight, or he's avocado toast." Something like that. The bartender rolled his eyes and set my drink down in front of me. I slammed it down and ordered a Sam Adams. Halfway through that, I was starting to feel better. Just after midnight, the bar started filling up with more business suits. A bunch of white, cocky-looking dudes, all talking loudly. I heard the bartender mutter under his breath. He was a middle-aged black guy, looking very tired and ready to go home. "Looks like the asshole convention is in town," he said. I had one more beer, then headed up to my room. Lena and Emma were dead asleep. I crawled in bed next to Lena and was out in no time at all. I woke up late and missed out on the coffee pods that the hotel provides for each room, as Lena had already gotten to them. She and Emma were bouncing around on the other bed, while a Paw Patrol cartoon played on the TV. I figured there would be some coffee in the lobby or something, so I left the room and headed that way. In the hallway, 3 cleaning ladies were on their knees, scrubbing away at the floor. As I got closer, I saw that they were trying to clean up this massive brown stain. "Jerks," one of the ladies was saying. No consideration at all. It wasn't hard to guess that one or several of the business suits had left that stain after a night of heavy drinking. I nodded to the ladies, then made my way to the elevator and pushed the button. When the door opened, a group of maybe 20 teenage girls in red, short uniforms, soccer, I figured, poured out of the elevator. I marveled that so many of them had fit in there and stepped in. The girls had pushed every button in the elevator, so I had to wait as it stopped on each floor. Floor 8, ding, the door opened. Nobody came in, the door closed. Floor 7, ding, and so on. I needed some coffee. I made it to the lobby, and it was packed to capacity. The business suits were all milling around, talking loudly, and there were just as many teenage girls in different colored uniforms, holding forth while simultaneously typing away on their phones. I weaved my way through the throng, got my coffee, and headed back to the elevator. 3 of the girls and one of the business suits got on with me. As we rode up, I looked over and saw that the man was ogling the girls in their shorts. I felt the rage bubbling up as we climbed higher, and when the girls got off on the 6th floor, I turned to the man and said, "Did you get a good look, asshole?" He smiled at me. "Should the help really be talking to the guests that way? Do I have to make a report to your manager?" I was on the verge of telling him that I didn't work there, but then I knew that he knew that. He was just being a smug dick. I briefly considered cold cocking him, but I knew he wouldn't be honorable about it, and he'd sue me or get me arrested, and then I would be screwed. So I kept my mouth shut until I got off at the 9th floor and called him a douchebag on my way out. The whole thing left me in a foul mood, but as the day wore on, I forgot about it. We ended up having a fine day, visiting with Grandma, and then looking at all of the fish and sea creatures at the Tampa Aquarium. That night, I was awakened at 2:30 a.m. by horrific screaming. It sounded like torture or slaughter. I shook Lena. "Hey," I said, "did you hear that?" Said Lena. "That screaming. It sounds like somebody's getting murdered, or worse." "I don't hear anything. It was loud. Maybe it was a dream," said Lena, turning over to go back to sleep. I felt a chill on the back of my neck and sat there wide awake for an hour, just listening. But I didn't hear anything except the heavy breathing of Lena and Emma deep in sleep, so finally I joined them. In the morning, I again missed out on the coffee in the room and again made my way to the lobby. Again, there were 3 cleaning ladies furiously scrubbing at a fresh brown stain in the hallway. This time, I shuddered when I saw it. Something was going on. We had another full day, the zoo this time, and by the end of it, I was exhausted from walking around in the Florida heat. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the screaming that I had heard the night before and that brown stain. Just before midnight, I headed down to the lounge. It was full of business suits, loud and obnoxious as always. The same bartender was there. I ordered a Sam Adams, and when he set it down, I asked him, "Hey, did you hear that horrible screaming last night? Middle of the night, like 2:30. He shrugged. "I don't know nothing, man." That struck me as an odd thing to say. "What's that mean?" You didn't hear it, or you don't know what it was. Means what it means, man. Means I don't know nothing. Okay, thanks, I said. I sat there drinking my beer, asking myself if that was really a weird thing to say, or if I was just tired and getting paranoid. Maybe it had been a dream after all. That screaming. No, I had heard it, and the bartender was definitely being squirrely. I was loath to talk to them, but finally curiosity got the better of me, and I went over to a table of business suits. Hey, I said. They stopped talking and looked me over. We don't need any more drinks right now, one of them said. I sighed. They liked that joke. Did anybody hear that screaming last night? Oh yeah, said one of them. That was my doing. Sorry about that, friend. That was you? It sounded like somebody getting killed. What happened? Wow, said the man. This is really awkward. Look, it wasn't my fault, I swear. What? What wasn't your fault? Banging your wife, friend. She's a wild ride. All of the men at the table erupted in laughter. I had some brief thoughts, but they all ended with me in jail, so I clenched my jaw, left my beer at their table, and headed back to my room. While I got to my floor, I heard someone giggling. When I turned the corner, I saw a business suit open up his door. There behind him was one of the teenage girls in her short red uniform. She was sort of weaving around, obviously drunk or wasted on some kind of drugs. The man grabbed her wrist and shoved her into his room. Then he went in and closed the door behind him. I stood there frozen for a moment. I didn't know whether to call the police or try to handle it myself. I thought about that monster in there, raping the girl. It could happen before the police arrived. I ran down the hall and began banging on the door. After a minute, the man opened the door a crack with a chain on it that keeps it from opening all the way. What the fuck do you want? He said. The girl, I said. What girl? Open the door, I said. Listen, asshole, he said. Go back to your room and sleep it off, or I'm calling the cops. You're calling the cops? I said. No, I'm calling the cops, unless you open that fucking door. He slammed it closed. I dialed 911. There's a man here, I told the lady. He got a teenager drunk, and now he's alone with her in his room. I gave her the details and then started banging on the door again. Eventually, a man turned the corner and came down the hall. I recognized him. He was the guy who told me he'd been screwing my wife. What the hell is going on out here? He asked. This guy, I said, choking down my rage and pointing at the door. He's got a teenage girl in there, drunk. I think he's raping her. The man smiled. Nah, he said. Victor wouldn't do that. He stepped up beside me and knocked on Victor's door. Victor, he called through the door. Are you in there raping some girl? Mark? That you? Asked Victor through the door. Yeah, said Mark. Are you raping a girl in there? Jesus, Mark, would you get that nut job out of here? I've called the police, but if he just leaves, I won't press charges. Mark looked at me. Look, guy, I think you better head back to your room and go to sleep. You don't want to deal with the cops, do you? Fine, I said. We'll wait for the cops. Then I shouted through the door. Hear that, Victor? The cops are coming for you. The cops came 15 minutes later, 2 of them. We've got calls from both of you, said one of them to me. We're going to sort this out right now. He knocked on Victor's door. Sir, this is the police. I'm going to need you to open up. The door opened right away, and the cop stepped in. I tried to follow, but the second cop put his hand on my chest and told me to wait outside. A few endless minutes later, the cops emerged. Sir, said the first cop, addressing me. Have you been drinking tonight? He sure has, said Mark, who was still standing out there with me. Earlier at the bar, he was ranting about somebody screaming last night, but nobody else heard any screaming. Officers, this man is delusional. We can't have him harassing us all the time. We're here on important business. Sir, said the cop to Mark, we're going to need you to go back to your room and get some sleep. Mark shrugged, then walked down the hall to his room. The cop turned to me. He asked me a bunch of questions, who I was, what I was doing there, that sort of thing. Finally, after conversing with his partner, he said, we're going to let this slide. I think that maybe you had one too many and you really think that you saw a girl go in there and you're trying to do the right thing. But I'm leaving word at the department as well as the front desk here. If there's one more incident, it's game over. Do you understand? I nodded. Good. Now, go back to your family and get a good night's sleep. "Thank you, officers," I said. And then I did walk down the hall to my room and went in. Lena and Emma were sleeping, but I couldn't. I lay awake all night wondering what Victor did to the girl, how he made her disappear into thin air. And as I was asking myself that, I realized that it was completely insane. I didn't feel insane. I'd seen that girl go into that room, but the girl wasn't there when the cops searched the place, and there was no exit other than the door that I was standing in front of the whole time. And that, I decided, might just mean that I had gone insane. The next day passed in a daze. We had a barbecue at Lena's mother's house, and I somehow made it through. Lena knew that something was wrong, but I did my best to act like everything was normal. But at some point I asked, "What do you think about staying at a different hotel tonight?" "Why would we do that?" asked Lena. "This is our last night here. We already paid for the room." I shrugged. It's just all of those businessmen crawling around the place creep me out. I saw one of them making eyes at one of the soccer girls. "Yeah," agreed Lena, "they're creeps. But not worth changing hotels over." "I guess you're right," I said. That night, after the girls were out, I decided to head down to the lounge again because I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep. As the elevator door was closing, a hand reached in to stop it, and then Mark stepped in. "Listen, buddy," he said. "We know who you are." He said my name, my wife's name, my kid's name, our home address, and the home address of our employers. "Who are you?" I asked after taking a hard swallow. "What do you want?" "We're going to destroy you," said Mark, "for fucking with Victor. The cops might have let you off, but we're not going to. Say goodbye to your bank account. Say goodbye to your house. It'll all be gone by the time you get back." I didn't know what to say, what to do. I just stood there, my mind whirling. The elevator dinged its way down and Mark got off on the ground floor, but I didn't. I rode back to the 9th floor and stood in front of my door for a long time, thinking. I had to protect myself, protect my family, but how? I had no idea whom I was dealing with. Could they really do that? Wipe out my bank account and all of that? I didn't think so, but I didn't know. They sure were able to find out the details of my identity quickly and easily enough. At some point, I must have dozed off, leaning against the outside of the door to my room. I hadn't slept at all in 36 hours. I was awakened by the screaming. I looked at my phone. It was 2:30 a.m. The screaming sounded like it had come from just around the corner. I stood up and walked slowly down the hall. It was totally silent. I got to the corner and slowly stuck my head around it. There, a ways down, was a group of a dozen or so of the girls in red uniforms, kneeling down, hunched over something. I stepped around the corner. Is everything okay?" I asked, walking forward. In unison, the girls snapped their heads around to look at me. I recognized one as the girl who had been led into Victor's room, but she, and all of them, looked different now. Their eyes were glowing red, and they had something in their mouths. As I got closer, I saw what it was. They were chewing on human intestines. With my eyes, I followed the intestines down to the bodies, and there, lying quite dead, were Mark and Victor, with twisted expressions of absolute horror etched into their faces. The girls grinned at me around the intestines. Each one had a smear of blood on her forehead, painted into a symbol. It was a circle with 3 slashes running diagonally through it. I vomited there in the hallway. The girls turned back to the bodies. I turned around and walked to the door of my room, opened it, got into bed next to my wife, and fell immediately into a deep sleep, my mind having been shut down completely. In the morning, I was up early enough to get a cup of coffee in the room. We packed our things, checked under the beds one last time, then headed out into the hallway. We turned the corner, and there were 3 cleaning ladies on their knees, scrubbing away at a large brown stain. Absolute slobs. One of the ladies was muttering. I nodded to them as we walked to the elevator. "Can I push the button?" asked Emma. "Sure thing, kiddo," I said. Emma pushed the button, the elevator came, and we rode down to the lobby. Everyone was checking out. The businessmen, the teenage girls, and us. I saw that same girl there, the one who had disappeared in Victor's room, suitcase in one hand, phone in the other. She looked up from her phone for a brief moment and smiled. It felt like she was looking at me, but I couldn't be sure. We checked out and headed home. The Green-Eyed Gift. Donde Está Santa Claus was blaring on the radio as Ethan crossed over state lines into somewhere. He lost track of where he was hours ago. Somewhere Midwesty. He was driving back east for Christmas. Too cheap to fly. He thought he'd take the opportunity to get to see America. The real America. Turns out, most of the real America was lots of nothing next to lots of scenic nothing. No cars on the highway except him. It was late. Dashboard display said 2:17 a.m. Taking his eyes off the endless stretch of highway, he glanced up at the night sky. For the briefest of moments, he swore the moon looked green. Squinting, he could see it plainly was not. Just a big OL circle in the sky made of cheese, like they always said. It's amazing what you think you see after 17 hours on the road. He smeared his open palm down his face, trying to get the sleep out of his eyes by force. The husks of 5-hour energy containers littered the passenger seat. He instinctively reached for another pick-me-up, but swore as he remembered he'd sucked dry the last one about 80 miles back. He needed to find somewhere to crash for a few hours. He definitely needed to gas up, maybe grab some food. The sign he flew by offering everything he was looking for, plus the biggest vacuum in the continental U.S., was just too good an offer to pass up. Pulling into town, he coasted over to the gas station. The prices were ridiculous, but Ethan didn't exactly have a wealth of options. They must have gotten greedy from all the tourism the vacuum brought in. He had passed the celebrated home appliance as he made his way into town, green and red lights shining on its little placard. Couldn't have been taller than 6 feet. The 8th wonder of the world. As he stood outside his Honda in the bitter cold, Ethan saw the neon glow of a sign promising donuts, burritos, and hot dogs. His stomach rumbled. Between sleep and hunger, it looked like hunger was going to come out on top. He looked around as he rubbed his hands together for warmth. Amidst the shuttered shops and gray buildings that made up the small town, he could see a diner across the street. Whatever they got had to be better than, he assumed, day-old hot dogs. The pump stopped with a loud gulp. He placed it back in its gas-soaked cradle, inserted his card, tossed the receipt, and drove the 100 yards over to the diner. He saw a cop car parked out front. A middle-aged policeman appeared to be dozing inside, half-finished Twix bar in hand. Guess the donuts at the gas station weren't up to snuff, Ethan thought, as he slammed the car door shut and pushed open the sleek metallic entrance to the diner. The bell above the door jingled brightly, alerting the diner patrons of the new arrival. 5 or 6 other people were scattered throughout, munching on curly fries and slurping milkshakes. Not exactly a happening spot. Ethan walked over to the counter and took a seat on one of the round, bright red stools. In moments, he was greeted by a stocky man in a paper chef's hat. It was green. Weren't they always white? Ethan was staring at the hat for a few seconds before the man spoke. "What can I get you, pal?" He tossed Ethan a menu and started wiping his hands on his already filthy apron. Ethan didn't bother looking at the menu. Double bacon cheeseburger, mid-rare, curly fries, 2 waffles, and a Coke in the largest glass you got. The chef nodded in approval. "You got it, Chief." About 15 minutes. After a few seconds, the chef, Dale, plopped a football-sized glass in front of Ethan, completely shielding himself from view. It was large and plastic. The container itself seemed to shimmy and undulate with the absurd amount of soda and ice cubes floating around inside. Ethan shifted the glass slightly so he could see the chef and thank him. "No problem, bud." The chef casually dropped a straw in front of Ethan. Ethan ripped off the paper sleeve of the straw and dropped it into the glass. It disappeared instantly, vanishing under all those dark bubbles. Leaning over the side of the counter, Ethan grabbed a few more straws. He fished out the drowned straw, fashioned them all into one elephant trunk of a device, dropped it into the drink, and greedily began to suck it down. He didn't realize how thirsty he was until that ice-cold, fizzy lifeblood was flooding his system. He was so distracted in caffeine-fueled ecstasy, he didn't notice the presence behind him. "You want to see the Christ child?" the voice said. You want to see the Christ child? The voice said. Who? What? Ethan sputtered, almost falling off his diner stool. The Christ child? Want to see him? The man was dressed in an army surplus jacket. It was riddled with stains that drew attention away from the greasy hair that hung about his face in stark patches. Regaining his composure and his seat, Ethan responded to the man. Look, buddy, I'm not an idiot. He's born on Christmas, not before. If you want to run a scam, at least get the facts right. If you're looking for a handout, I don't have any cash. I've got waffles coming soon. You want some, they're yours. Just leave me alone. The dirty man, Caleb, stared at Ethan, no reaction in his eyes. The other patrons of the diner looked like they were doing their best to ignore the entire scene. The grill chef, Dale, shared a glance with Ethan and rolled his eyes. But Caleb stood like a statue, staring at Ethan, unblinking. It was impossible for Ethan to ignore the dirty man's presence. Finally, he swiveled his diner stool slightly in Caleb's direction. All right, I'll bite. What is it? You trying to unload some Christmas cards before the season's over? You got a dog in a box out there with a halo stapled to its head? What's the angle? Through filthy teeth, Caleb smiled. No angle. You come out, I show you the Christ child, and if you don't believe 100% that he is what I say he is, I pay for your dinner. Ethan considered the prospect of a free and clear dinner. It would cap off his stay in Nowheresville and give him a great story for Christmas dinner. Lead on. Champ. Ethan turned to the cook as he got up off of his stool. I'll take a check when I get back. This gentleman has generously agreed to take CA. Not yet. Caleb cut in with his unblinking stare. Okie dokie then. Let's go. Caleb led him out the doors of the diner into the crisp, gray winter night. They walked 2 blocks down the street, passing the empty and shuttered shop windows. It's right down here. Caleb pointed in the direction of an alleyway. Ethan stopped and peered down the filthy, empty passage. Shadows dancing in the trash and discarded pizza boxes. He had a few inches and at least 50 pounds on this guy if he tried to pull anything. He could have a gun or a knife, but he didn't think so. Didn't look like the twitchy type. But he didn't want to be stupid. Go right ahead, bud. This is a follow-the-leader situation. Caleb's smile never left his face. Sure, man. In the dim illumination of the corner streetlight, they navigated the alley. Caleb led him to a small box at the far side, almost touching the brick dead end. He pointed, in there. Open it up and you'll see. Ethan maneuvered around the box, so he had his back to the wall and was facing Caleb. He looked down at the small, slightly damp-looking cardboard and smiled. Free dinner, and then back on the road. He opened the flaps and looked inside. He stared silently. After a minute or two, he reached in and pulled something out. It was a small shape wrapped in a bundle of torn clothes. Pulling back the cloth covering, it revealed a child. A child with the most striking and beautiful green eyes he'd ever seen. As he held the child, Ethan felt like he was plunged into an ocean of calm. Every fear, every worry he had ever had fled like shadows in the sunlight. With tears welling in his eyes, he turned to the man who'd extended an invitation to meet his savior. You know, I never really believed, it just didn't make sense to me. But this... He looked down at the smiling child. This makes sense. An energized look crossed Ethan's face. Who else can we tell? Everybody has to know about this. Everybody. He was cut off by the large set of jaws that clamped down and tore out his throat. In his pain and panic, he dropped the child, its tiny mouth stained with crimson. Faster than he thought possible, arms reached out to catch the baby. Arms belonging to Caleb. Sliding down the brick wall of the alley, Ethan ripped off his sleeve and stuffed it against the spurting, open wound on his neck in a desperate attempt to staunch the bleeding. That's not the Christ child, he choked out, struggling to stay conscious. Caleb stroked the light tufts of hair on the baby's head as he spoke. Oh, it's the Christ child, all right. He motioned to the opening of the alleyway. The diner patrons, the grill chef, even the sleeping cop he had passed parked in his patrol car. They were all gathered there, crowding out the light. all staring, with their brilliant green eyes. "It's just not your Christ child, it's ours." Caleb smiled his dead-eyed smile. "And every Christ child needs gifts. Thank you for bringing the first." The last thing Ethan ever saw was Caleb lowering that thing wrapped in swaddling clothes down to his level. It gurgled as its tiny face split apart to make way for endless rows of shiny, red-stained teeth. Whisperdrop. I'm a grown woman, so it's been years since I don't live by my mother's rules. But there's one thing I will always respect. Never go to bed with wet hair. For my mother, it meant catching a cold. But for me, it was something else entirely. Last night, I decided to break this rule. The weather was too warm, and I had to wash my hair because I was feeling all sweaty and gross. But I hate using the hairdryer, so I just used a towel and went to sleep. The whole night, thumping noises coming from under my bed kept me awake. They were only on my side of the bed. Since my husband is out of town, I rolled to his side, but the noises shifted as well. I know most people would be bothered, but I decided to get up, go to the bathroom, and blow dry my hair once and for all. It's not too much work anyway. When I got back, the noises stopped. I spent a good 20 minutes trying to sleep, but I was too happy, so I had to ask, "Misty, is that you?" A soft thump was all the answer I needed. You see, I was a lonely kid. I only had two friends, Bubbles, my guinea pig, and Misty, the monster under the bed. The monster part is so prejudiced. They are actually very sweet. Misty would never let me sleep having done something I believed to be wrong. Once, I stole some change from my mother's purse to buy candy, and he never stopped thumping and making the bed shake until I put it back. Sometimes I couldn't sleep at night because I was sad and lonely. Then I would ask him questions, and Misty would answer with a single thump for yes, or a shake for no. He was so smart and cared about me. I named him Misty because sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night to soft dripping noises coming from under the bed. I never knew what it was, but I didn't mind. It helped me sleep, like gentle rain on your windowsill. He was there for me even in my teenage years, when I made friends and forgot him for a long time. The day I smoked weed and didn't like it, but decided to keep smoking anyway to be cool. He violently shook my bed until I promised him I would never do it again. Ever since I moved from my parents' home in the rural area, I lost contact with Misty. But somehow, he found me. I didn't have much sleep, but woke up full of joy and was singing while making myself breakfast. I don't have kids and work from home, so sometimes I watch my neighbor's kids. Today, I had little Luna over. Luna is usually a quiet kid, but today she was a bit agitated, so I decided to take a break and play with her. She's 4 years old. Probably some running around would be enough to have her sound asleep on the couch. While I got some work done, we agreed to play hide and seek. After finding each other a few times, I was counting when I heard her tiny footsteps disappearing in the general direction of my bedroom. I looked for her everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found. I couldn't even hear breathing, laughing, or the noise of her shoes changing hiding spots. My apartment is not big, so there's nowhere else she could have been. Then I remembered an episode from my childhood. Bubbles once went under my bed and disappeared. I cried for days, until my parents found him somewhere completely unrelated. He was a lot chubbier, and his fur had a different color. But my mom told me guinea pigs are all like that. They change colors all the time. That's their magic. He never changed colors again, and forgot all the tricks I had taught him. But I love him anyway. So here's the thing. I think Luna tried to hide under the bed, and Misty took her somewhere else. I'll ask him later. In the meantime, I was obviously worried and anxious to tell my neighbor that her daughter went missing, but I made sure to tell her. It was very likely Luna would appear somewhere else in a few days. As a result, my neighbor hates me and made it clear she plans to report me to the police. Today, I couldn't sleep because the dripping sounds were so loud and kind of unnerving. Misty told me he hasn't seen Luna, but I think he's lying for some reason. I asked if I could go under the bed to check it out, and he said yes.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.